Welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. It's the fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic, blessed podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area. We're struggling a bit this week, Ben and I, because we have no commentaries by F.F. Bruce on Matthew chapter 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. We've been weeping over that.
We have to merely speculate what Morris sounded like, or Moo.
Oh, I know what Moo sounds like.
Oh yes, because he's actually still alive, isn't he? I forget. Yes, of course.
Oh, I wasn't thinking of that.
Were you just going to make a moo noise?
Yeah, I was going to go.
I'm sure no one never did that to him.
Yeah,
There's only two ways to go, right? I guess because he obviously was bullied at school horribly.
You don't go to seminary unless you were.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say you either kind of join the military and become like a commando.
Yeah.
Or you become a scholar.
Yeah, we all cope with our stuff in different ways.
So we had 5 months of sermons on a sermon, as you put it.
Yeah,
Hebrews is a sermon.
Hebrews is a sermon, and it was a 5-month journey, and we just wrapped it up last week with the dog's dinner, as we called it, of Hebrews 13. It's just saying like. And
now as we start another sermon on another sermon, you might look at the Beatitudes, Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 12, and think, oh, it's another dog's dinner. Quite the opposite. I think this is possibly one of the most coherent scriptures that we have. Yeah,
one of the most sophisticated, structured, carefully,
yes,
and also the way that it ties into the rest of the whole book of Matthew is great, like just all kinds of hyperlinks to the Old Testament and hooks into other things, and like it's very, very structured. And also, this isn't just another sermon. This is the sermon.
It is the sermon.
This is the greatest sermon ever preached.
Yeah, and it's highly likely that the introduction is the key to understanding the whole thing. That actually the structure, the very intricate structure of our verses today is highly relevant. If you can understand that, then you can actually understand the whole sermon.
Oh yeah. Do you want to? Would you want to jump in, or do you want to say something about just the relevance of this in our culture, our life? And
I would like you to.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I just think like Sermon on the Mount is everywhere throughout the culture. People, there's traces of it. We're kind of a Christ-haunted society. And so there's certain things like judge not lest you be judged that are like all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
This whole idea of you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Like John Winthrop, when he came here with the Puritans, they set up their whole society. Like America was, well, you can argue that America wasn't founded by the Puritans, but like parts of our society were founded by these people who saw themselves as the city on the hill, kind of like the experimental society that the world was watching.
And love your enemies is a very Christian Western idea, isn't it? When you look at, for example, I'm reading a few books and things about the Second World War at the moment, and if you look at how, say, for instance, prisoners of war were treated by the Germans versus the Japanese, you see a culture, even though Hitler was going out of his way to eradicate Christianity, which he viewed as a sort of offshoot of Judaism. Yeah. Nonetheless, the German people, a country that was profoundly impacted by the Reformation, was also still heavily Catholic also, has this idea of treating your enemies woven through its fabric, no matter what harm Nazism was trying to do to the culture of Germany.
Yeah, you can go on a step further. Like, Tom Holland argues,
and his friend.
No, just Tom Holland.
Oh, on his own.
Yeah, in his book Dominion, he gives an argument that basically human rights as we know it is like stems out of this
Christian faith.
Yeah.
So out of specifically out of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah. Like
Ooh, yeah.
and you know, Dallas Willard just called this a serious ethical treatise on the same, that is on the same level with John Rawls or any other ethicist in our day. Like this is really heavy stuff.
Pretty low praise.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Wow, Jesus is almost as good as Rawls.
Well, mind you, like he was talking with a bunch of like highbrow academic people.
Right,
he was a philosophy professor at UCLA. But it's all over the place. Like,
right, but you don't find that. I was in you know, if you look at the way that prisoners of war were treated in Japan, for example, and you read any of those, or in Burma, you read any of those kind of accounts, like To End All Wars, or Bridge Over the River Kwai, or whatever, you see just how an enemy was treated with subhuman disdain. Because the gospel hadn't really blown through the country in the same way.
Yeah, there wasn't this sense of that human beings have inherent dignity. Loving your enemies is not normal.
No.
This is...
You can say with the Lord's Prayer, were you going to say?
Yeah, the Lord's Prayer is in here. I'm just looking through and seeing the golden rule.
Yeah.
Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. You know, enter by the narrow gate. Build your house on the rock. All of it's. This is all in the Sermon on the Mount. Like
it's incredible how many of our ideas come from this.
Yeah, but I would argue that we've actually lost sight of, in our culture, of the teaching of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yes,
and it would be a very different society if we actually took this seriously and really wrestled with it the way that we ought.
Yeah, and I think. I was sort of reading a couple of how different ministers had treated this specific passage, and I think I found that some people almost teach a week on each blessed. We'll look at all these blessed's in a minute. It's blessed the poor, blessed those who mourn, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's also a mistake because we lose some of the coherence of what it's about when we do that.
Yeah.
So it says in chapter 5, verse 1, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him.
I have a question about this.
Yeah, go on then.
Is it like, in The Chosen, how like they make it like...
He was standing in The Chosen.
He was standing in The Chosen, and it was like this big thing. They went around from town to town and advertised like, Jesus' big sermon is coming up. And they like, then on the morning of, like they give him a special like blue sash or whatever.
Yeah.
And like everybody's excited. It's this electric moment. I never really read it like that. This looks more like the crowds are just there because Jesus has been doing his ministry.
It reads like he's responding to them, doesn't it?
Yeah. And he's like, and also that he's talking to his disciples.
Yeah.
Not to the crowds.
Yes. Well, or it feels like he's doing almost two.
Yeah.
And you wonder whether the sermon's landing on two levels when you see this, because you've got the crowds and the disciples. So is he teaching the disciples in a deeper way at the same time as he's teaching the crowds in the way that, we might try and preach every week to those who've followed each sermon?
Yeah.
Right? They're now 11 sermons into an exposition of the Old Testament holy place and altar.
Yeah.
Right. But you're also kind of preaching at a level. What if someone's brand new and they haven't read the story so far? And they've got to receive some good news.
Yeah, it's not like Blue's Clues or other preschool shows where you just like there's no prereqs starting at all.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's threading that needle because you need to needs to be approachable to people who don't know what's going on.
Well, I do love The Chosen, and I think actually it's out again now. We can start watching it again.
Yeah.
They've solved their legal battle that they were having about release.
That's cool.
Which is great. So we can watch
that.
again. I think they do a really great job. But you're absolutely right. Chapter 4 ends by saying that Jesus is going throughout all Galilee, and people and great crowds followed him.
What kind of people, though? This is the other question I have. Like, he went throughout all. This is chapter 4, verse 23. I'm sorry if I'm going too slow on this. I'm just really fascinated by.
Well, you're going backwards actually, but carry on.
Yeah,
the word.
This is like we made negative 6 verses of progress today. This is what happens when you let me loose on things like the Sermon on the Mount.
Oh, yeah.
So he's going around to all of Galilee, northern Israel, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria. Where's Syria at again? Is that north? That's north, yeah. And they brought to him the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, the oppressed with demons, those having seizures, paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. Okay, wow, they're from everywhere, right?
Yes, they are.
So it's not just the country bumpkin Galileans.
I got bogged down in researching where Syria was while you were talking, sorry.
Where's Syria?
It is in the north. It's bounded by Taurus and a range of mountains called the Am-Anus, which is kind of a funny name for a mountain. I'm imagining they got bullied as well.
Yeah, those mountains?
Yeah, like Douglas Moo. The Anus Mountains.
Oh, man. We're off to a great start on this one. We can tell this is going to be a good...
So we've gone back we're quite a long way.
Well, I just wanted to get a sense of who... I've always thought about this. Who's he talking to, right? It matters for the Epistle to the Hebrews that these are a group of Jewish Christians who are thinking about retreating back into Judaism.
This is everyone.
This is just they're all... Well, they're not all Jews, right?
No, it's a gang.
The Decapolis, there's some Greeks.
Yeah, as well as a gallery of people who are struggling with a great many things.
And then you have some the urbanites from Jerusalem and Judea, and then beyond the Jordan.
Yeah,
that's it's all over the place. So
Chosen gets that really good. Actually, it does that really well.
Yeah.
Do you remember that bit where it looks like there's going to be a fight scene between all these disparate groups?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That's where he does the feeding the 5,000. Yeah. That's season 2, 3.
So we're now starting this. There's a whole crowd. Crowds, plural. That's just interesting.
Oh, I never noticed that before.
No.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if it's legit. Oh man, I'm going to have to flick from my little thing. Doesn't have to do it the hard way. Yes, it's plural.
Crowds.
Oculus.
Well, it makes sense because they're coming from all kinds of different places. Lots of crowds.
Yeah. So crowds is, and he went up the mountain and he sat down. I don't think that's just a little throwaway remark. This is a rabbinical posture. This is how a rabbi would teach. Mm-hmm. So in the way that we stand to preach, they sat to preach. So this is showing, his sitting is showing that he's about to teach them.
I wonder what the teaching would be like, how it would be different if the teacher sat and everyone else stood.
Be quieter.
Do you think that maybe the sermons would be longer? Everyone's dying. Just, they're in trouble.
Yeah, but the grass is always greener, isn't it? If you've sat on the pews in our church.
Mm-hmm. I get complaints about them frequently.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I tell them, come and sit in my little seat. It's even worse.
Oh, yeah. I just tell them to suck it up.
It's worse. that's pastoral ministry, folks. So could be worse.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, but not really.
So seeing the crowds, he went up the mountain. He sat down, which is a rabbinical posture of teaching, which means he's about to teach. And that's one of the reasons we know it's a sermon, because he's about to do his thing. And I think he's doing it at 2 levels. So we'll have to read it at 2 levels. Yeah. And then we have this thing entitled the Beatitudes, which is just derived from the Latin, the blesseds. And then a whole bunch of blessedses. He opened his mouth and taught them. That's just a kind of Hebraic saying. Yeah. He started teaching. And here we go. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
That's 3 blesseds.
Yeah. And what they have in common, these 3 blesseds, is that these are dodgy people.
Yeah.
Let's look at them together, right? So poor in spirit, not just poor generally. I think this gets a bit misinterpreted sometimes. It doesn't just mean the poverty-stricken financially.
What does poor in spirit mean? Does that mean humble, or does it mean lousy, non-religious people, incapable of?
So I'm not fully sure, but I think it means those who know they're not perfect.
Oh.
So
the low down in their spirit, like that which animates you.
those who know that they are sinners,
The down and outs.
yeah, spiritually speaking, those who know that they're not perfect, those who know that they're not holy, those who know that they're not righteous.
Well, that makes sense, because if it was just blessed are the poor, which I think that's what Luke's version says, but if you didn't have that in spirit, then that wouldn't include like Matthew, who was a tax collector, but was still an outcast in a society.
He's plainly using poverty as a metaphor for what we know financially, what poverty is. We know what that is. It's
Yeah.
not being able to afford things. He's using that spiritually for people that can't afford to buy their way into heaven.
The spiritually bankrupt.
Yes, the spiritually bankrupt.
Got it.
And so they might well be really terrible people, right? Just rotten sinners.
Yeah.
But they might also be quite holy people who are actually pretty nice, civically well-minded, and even religiously pretty sophisticated, and even quite obedient. But what they're not is rich. And by the way, by rich, what I mean is infinitely rich. They're not perfect. They haven't got the same amount of spiritual capital that God has.
Yeah.
Because that's the standard. The
Yeah.
standard is, what is the standard? The standard is the same spiritual capital that God has. So what they don't do is have a full ownership of the entire perfect righteousness of the universe.
And what they will receive, even though they are poor in spirit, is the kingdom of heaven,
Which
the
is
rule of God's righteousness.
Yeah, the richness of God, the title of God, the entitled riches and status and blessing and life and kingdom and power and authority and all of it of God.
Another thing that I'm just noting, this phrase "kingdom of heaven." I think that is a pretty important thing, because he just talked about proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom. At some point throughout this, I don't know if it's something that I can just define automatically, but the kingdom of heaven is a big theme throughout Matthew.
Yeah.
So, and it means something about God's rule and reign and being kind of realized, from what I get the sense of.
And presence, right?
Yeah, his presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and I don't think it means the funny cloud place where he is.
No, not remote.
I think it means any place where the immanent power of God is there. So life with the King.
Yeah.
Right.
Where's the kingdom? Where's Jesus?
Right. And he will get onto this.
Yeah.
These are key themes, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay. So blessed, for some reason, we don't know why yet. This has not been said. Blessed, happy, joyful, makairos.
Makarios or
Makarios, yeah.
Makarios. Is that what's the Aramaic or Hebrew? Is that coming out of sort of the idea of shalom? Is that tied to that word? Do you know?
I don't know.
Because like I know Hebrew, like shalom is something more than just like peace.
Shalom is the proximity to God.
It's a big deal.
Oh.
It's okay if you don't know right now.
No. Fortunate, well off.
Well off.
Yeah.
They're in they're in the catbird seat, as James Thurber put it.
Yeah. They're doing
Okay.
well. So blessed happy, well off are the poor, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
It's so Jesus. Like say something.
But he hasn't finished. So he just says it. And it means what we just said it means. But that is not a complete thought. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Right. This could be still metaphor time. So he might mean blessed are those who are, really, really sad because someone has died. Could mean that. But given that he hasn't yet completed his thought, it's likely connected to what he's already said. Blessed are those who mourn what? Right. Well, it could be blessed are those who mourn the reality of their unrighteousness. Blessed are those who look at their spiritual poverty and say, oh, I'm in trouble. And who feel about their spiritual poverty the way that we feel when we lose someone really important to us.
Well, I think that I think it works both ways, right? Because when you're mourning, in the presence of death and loss, you are opened up to the reality. You're exposed to the reality of your own unrighteousness and your own impending death in a way that you're not otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think that it can be both literal and metaphorical.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, we think about the poor as being, these are not people you think of as blessed. And they're certainly not people that you would want to be.
No.
And neither are mourners people that you want to be. No one wants to be in the absolute slough of despond.
No one's 5-year plan involves losing someone they love.
No.
Yeah.
Well, most people.
Yes,
but yeah,
correct.
Well, they probably don't love them. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So this is a connected thought, I believe, because, and I say that because he still hasn't really explained why on earth you would think poor people or mourning people are blessed.
Yeah.
And then he says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And it's still not a complete thought.
What is meek?
Well, it's humble.
Is it? Or is it Yeah, it's humble.
Gentle. But, right. If poverty was used metaphorically, and mourning might have been used metaphorically, it's reasonable to assume that meekness might also be used metaphorically here.
How would you be metaphorically meek?
Well, to be literally meek is to be kind of like a shy person just sort of muttering into their bulletin, sitting on the back pew, smiling.
Yeah, okay.
It might mean spiritually meek, which could be a little bit different. This is someone who is maybe taking a humble approach to their attitude to God instead of shaking their fist at God and saying, hey, look at all this terrible stuff around. This is your fault, God. What's going on? This is a catastrophe. How can I trust in you? It might be the kind of person that humbly says, God, I don't know what's happening right now, but I do trust in you.
I think that it's I think of the Pharisee and the tax collector, right? The guy standing far off, beating his breast and won't even look up. Says, God, be merciful to me. I'm a sinner. Yeah. There's a meekness there, but also, again, it cuts both ways. That attitude breeds real, actual meekness, because if you recognize the depth of your need for God, you're not going to be arrogant.
No, that's true, and I think that's right. Arrogance would be the opposite. Yeah. I mean, meekness is not a word that's just come out of nowhere. It's a well-known Old Testament phrase. So I think Jesus is kind of cashing in on something, a word that would have some concepts clinging to it from their culture. And in the Old Testament, the meek are those that rely on God instead of themselves. So I think it's reasonable to assume that this is a theological use of the word meek as opposed to a sociological one.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean shy people. He means trusting in God people. Yeah.
Okay.
But he still hasn't really explained why poor and mourning people and meek people should be considered blessed until we get to verse 6, which I suspect is the key verse.
Yeah. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied.
So the image is of someone lacking, and not just lacking, but desperate. Desperate in a sort of survival type language. Hunger and thirst, they're pretty close to starvation.
And they're not getting righteousness.
They don't have it.
Now, is this referring to like they want to be the desire to be a righteous person? Or is this the desire for righteousness to be done? Like,
I don't know.
A victim hungers and thirsts for righteousness. They want their, abuser to be brought to justice. But maybe a sinner will hunger and thirst for righteousness. You want to be a kind of person who does righteousness. And
it's probably all of the above. I mean,
do you think maybe he's like kind of cagey in all this because it is multivalent, as they say?
Yeah, I mean, so in Paul, when Paul uses the word righteousness, that's almost certainly a very specific legal term to describe someone's right standing before God. Their ability to have been purified and to have an upstanding nature that's been imputed upon them by the blood of Christ, such that they can stand before God under judgment and not be judged.
Yeah.
But Christ would be judged in their place. It's highly likely that this is not that.
Yeah. Okay.
Although it is the same word. But it's reasonable to sort of link it in your mind. And I think you're right. We could be looking at both the general sort of prevalence of God's righteous presence throughout the world, as well as our individual declaration of being upright.
I think, both apply, I guess. It seems like in all these things, there's like both people who are down and out. Like it can be interpreted kind of literally. It can be, there's some literalness in it. Like the poor in spirit, the total loser who cannot provide for themselves. The mourner, like the literal lost someone they love. The meek, the shy person. Like those can all be, in some ways there's a truth to that, but it also, there's a deeper level.
So it could be a hunger and thirst for basically the world to be better. And that would make sense in the context of the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come.
Yeah, the kingdom of God.
Right. So I think that is its primary meaning, which you're using it in a technical sense that way. But I think it's also legitimate to look at it from the idea of the regeneration of an individual.
Yeah.
And so how do you get to be righteous or live in a world that is righteous? Well, if you're poor and you're meek and you're in mourning, obviously it's not from your own strength.
Yeah.
Obviously. Likewise, if you're starving and you're thirsty, that's probably because you've run out of food and water, not because you've been on the Xbox too long.
These are people who are fundamentally unable to save themselves.
I think so.
Yeah.
So we do have hungry and thirsty teenagers in our household because they're playing Call of Duty and they haven't thought to go to the kitchen. But they could go to the kitchen.
Yeah.
I think this is a group of people that cannot go to the kitchen. So they're and then it says, for they shall be satisfied, which is clearly telling you that something's going to be given to them.
This really makes sense of, I think, everything we've seen so far in Matthew of Jesus's ministry, where he's dealing with sick, afflicted, oppressed people, and he's healing and driving out demons. So he's literally restoring afflicted or broken people to wholeness. But also it becomes really clear as he talks with the Pharisees and even as he calls his disciples that he's not just interested in, he's doing that on like a deeper level, I guess you could say, with all of these people. And so there's, it really is complicated.
Yeah. But the beauty about recognizing your spiritual bankruptcy is that you require someone else to pay the bill. That does look like a very poor line understanding of what righteousness is about. But at the same time, if you recognize that you lack the capacity to transform this whole world and make it better, then you're going to ask God to come and make it better. So that's why those first three groups of people, they're actually just one group, can be considered blessed.
And it seems like these are not inherently, on the face of it, good, like virtues. It's not like being poor in spirit, mourning, and being meek and hungering and thirsting are not virtues.
No, they're not at all. But now we do get three virtues rapidly in a row.
I think that's interesting.
And so how do we understand the three virtues? Blessed are the merciful, the pure in the heart, and the peacemakers. And I would say this is why we need the first 4 verses. Remember, you were spiritually bankrupt. Remember that you were in spiritual mourning. Remember that you are spiritually meek. And remember that you have been brought into righteousness or into a world that's becoming righteous by the satisfaction of God's provision of food and drink, spiritually speaking. So if you're going to go out and do these cool things, it cannot possibly be because you started out with this great bank of resources to use.
So he's not just saying, blessed are the virtuous. That is not the way that the Beatitudes works at all.
100% no.
But there's some kind of interesting virtue that sprouts up. being merciful, being pure in heart, or I guess that means like integrity kind of thing, or like,
well, bang on, right? So Jesus is going to say a lot. Let's take the anger thing for example, right? He says, you have heard that you should not commit murder, but I say to you, don't even be angry with your brother in your heart.
Yeah,
and he's saying that the feeling or the desire to kick your brother's teeth in is the same as actually doing it. And he says the same thing with lust, right? He says, it's the same. Look, if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out. Looking at women that way or men that way is the same as doing it. So he says this several times, that actually what goes on in our hearts is just as significant as what we do with our bodies. Yeah,
Augustine picked up on this idea and talked about, he said, purity of heart is to will one thing. And the idea is that we're kind of fragmented. We're kind of full of contradictions on the, maybe you want to be the kind of person who's like a good father and a husband, but also there's this other part of you that really just wants to gratify yourself. And we're kind of at war with ourselves, and there's also almost like multiple wills within us. We're fragmented people. It's part of what sin is. And so Jesus is saying being pure in heart. It's this singular thing.
And that fragmented thing, I think you could go all the way back to that idea of being poor in spirit. And you can say the completely destitute person who's got nothing good going on spiritually.
Yeah.
And the somewhat well-off person who has not got purity and perfection going on are in the same boat, because they're going to get a bill, right? And they can't afford it. And okay, your first person, he's got no dollars. Your second person has $100, but the bill's $1,000. Well, neither of you can pay it. And so you're both poor in spirit, even though you're not the same as each other. You're in the same position. And so as we get on then to this idea of being pure in heart, I guess you've got the same sort of thing. We've got these mixed hearts.
Yeah.
There's good and bad going on.
So is a person like all these things at one time? Are they poor in spirit but if you're not merciful, then you're not blessed? Or like, how do you become merciful, pure in heart, peacemaker?
So
that's the question.
I've imposed a lens onto the sermon. This is always a risk, isn't it? Like whenever we start saying, look, let me explain it like this.
Well, you're making an interpretive claim, which is totally valid. I think I think it's a good interpretive claim.
Well, my interpretive claim is this then. And there's a diagram in the bulletin this weekend. So that is the homiletical equivalent of printing it and putting it on a mug.
That is the stake in the ground. You've tied yourself to it, and you're like, let's do this.
Let's do this.
Yeah, but I like it. It makes way more sense than Dallas Willard's take on the Beatitudes.
Well, I'm not surprised about that. But let's. I would like to hear his take on it at some point. But I doubt it's mine.
It's not yours.
So
yours better.
He I think what he's saying is, come on a journey with me. This is one whole person. This is the life of a person. This is a person becoming a Christian. Let me take you through them. Okay? So, blessed are the poor in spirit, who mourn and are meek. It's the same person. They recognize their spiritual bankruptcy. They bewail their spiritual bankruptcy, and they humbly trust in God, even though they know they're spiritually bankrupt. They're blessed because, like a starving person, they need a meal to come to them, and God brings righteousness to them.
Yeah.
That could be their own personal righteousness of conversion. It's more likely in the context of Matthew, the righteous spreading of the kingdom. But you can't separate those two ideas completely. They're going to be connected.
Yeah.
And the connection comes next. Blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, and the peacemakers. These are three example things that manifest in the life of the person who has A, confessed their spiritual bankruptcy, and B, received righteousness.
It's almost
they flow out of it.
Oh, so the whole process of the gospel, essentially, of this is what changes between the first four and the next three. Well, Jesus is your point. The cross. All right, I think Yeah, I totally agree.
I think that's what changes. Otherwise, this is a lecture.
I've never figured out any way to. I've not seen anybody else come up with a good way to argue that there's a unity to the Beatitudes, because they are different. Those first 3 or 4 are just different than those next 3. Like the first 4 are not virtues, the next ones are virtues. So
something's changed.
Something has changed.
And if something's changed in between, the only thing that can have changed happened in verse 6. And what it says is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. So something to do with righteousness and satisfaction has occurred in verse 6. And there's enough language there for me to talk about the cross.
Yeah.
So,
well, obviously Jesus had the cross in mind as he's telling this. He knew from the very beginning that he was coming, he was going toward something.
Is it overreading it to say that hunger is bread and thirst is wine?
Oh,
is that just too much?
I mean, that's kind of analogous. Maybe I wouldn't be my gut to preach it, but it's an interesting thing to chew on it.
All right.
It's interesting.
Okay, we'll have to come back to the thought.
Their whole physicality though is once righteousness.
Yes.
So maybe it's not.
And they get it given to them as a gift.
They get it.
So, and satisfaction is, that is a word that we say in communion.
Satisfied.
Yeah. Which means to be full or fed.
Full or fed.
Or fattened. Ooh, like the fatted animal.
Wow.
Or to be fed with herbs, which is interesting. That seems quite specific. I don't think it's that.
I want to see where they get that. Like, what's the reference there?
I don't know. To be fed with herbs. Well, what a lovely thought.
This is fascinating to me.
I think it is. I think that might be a bit too niche.
No, but I really think you're onto something with this, because
not the herbs thing.
Maybe not the herbs or the herbs, as they say in
Herb.
Ohio. The herbs. But okay, so Dallas Willard's take was that none of them are at all virtues. That he's just referring to the down and outs. So the pure in heart are those people who are just like, they're too fixated on something, and so they can never make any compromises. I forget how he spins merciful to make it sound like it's not a good thing, and peacemakers, but I just never really bought it. I was always like, yeah, like these are clearly clearly there's some like fruit of the spirit going on here.
I think that R.T. France follows that same kind of line of thinking, and I don't think that works for me either. I mean, peacemakers, this is a unique word. We only find it here. But they're two pretty basic words stuck together in Greek, just as it is in English. It's peace and maker stuck together. Yeah. These are people that build or do the creation of peace.
Yeah.
That seems like a virtue. I mean, mercy, purity, and peace seem like virtues to me. So where have these virtues suddenly sprung from, if this is a logical discourse? It must be from something done to them. And that was the food they got.
So if I were to summarize everything we have so far, blessed are the low down who are brought up by grace.
Yes.
By the grace of God.
Yes. And so we know this is a sermon because two things have happened now. One, we've had the gospel, and two, we've had a so what section. So it is evidently a priori a sermon. The gospel is that you were completely poor, you couldn't afford the check. God paid it for you, and as a result of that, you've been transformed and started to live differently. I think that makes some sense. That would explain why we're blessed. But he hasn't finished, because then he says in verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Not just persecuted generally, but persecuted for righteousness' sake. And that might mean that might lean you towards the more Pauline understanding of righteousness, perhaps.
Yeah, because you're on the side of justice and goodness and faithfulness.
Yes.
you've sided with it, and you're being taken down. You're being afflicted or pursued because of that.
Because you did that very shameful thing of confessing that you were spiritually bankrupt, which is a very embarrassing thing to do. And because you did that terribly weak thing of being saved, and now because you've done that terribly transformed spirit-filled thing of being merciful, pure, and peacemaking, that has really annoyed quite a few people. You're now advancing righteousness, and this is like lifting rocks, and light is shining on people, and they're not liking it.
You know what just occurred to me?
Mm-hmm.
This would not have made sense to anyone that he was talking to, except for the disciples.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I think when they first heard this, they would have immediately gotten it. They'd be like, "Oh, he's talking about me."
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's the point. Like, they're just ordinary ho-hums that are out collecting taxes, betraying their people, doing fishing, all this stuff. They get drawn in and transformed by Jesus.
Right. And they certainly would feel that way with the merciful, pure, and peace thing, because he's giving them a job to do, like disciples.
Yeah.
So for sure.
They're now working for the kingdom, and they're already receiving persecution for righteousness' sake.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Matthew's a fascinating guy, right? He works for the persecutors. He works for the invading warmongers. Yeah. He now gives that up to go and make peace.
Yeah.
And puts his neck on the line.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a great example. It's still an odd thing, though, because he says, blessed are you when you're persecuted. And, persecution carries with it a sense, I think, in the original idiom of it being something from the authorities. So the idea is that you are actually really putting yourself at risk from the ire of the occupying forces of the land.
Oh, kind of an Alexei Navalny kind of thing.
You're going to get Navalny. We come back to him several times. It's a great example of someone who...
Yeah, I'm not laughing at Navalny, but...
Well, someone who's trying to do something righteous. I mean, there have been many, many revolts and rebellions throughout history that have just been to do with self-interest or just the vagaries of the political climate.
Yeah.
But you do get with someone like Navalny this sense that he's seeking to, was seeking to, at risk to himself, improve the country, as opposed to improve his own lot.
And testify to the truth.
Right. As is evidenced by his willingness to go back and go to jail.
Yeah.
So it's a great analogy. Blessed are those who put themselves between oppressive regimes and the people.
So this isn't just talking about like if your coworker thinks you're weird because you love Jesus. When we talk about persecution is like it has this institutional connotation. It
does, and it's become a real live thing, I think, for us as Anglican in recent times, because a lot of our hierarchies, our Anglican hierarchies, have tried to inhibit the ministries of godly ministers.
Yeah,
right. They've actually tried to pick on and persecute really biblical ministers. I mean, we saw this in the US with someone like Bob Duncan being deposed by the House of Bishops, because he was holding them to the Lordship of Christ and the authority of Scripture.
Yeah,
and we saw ministers here, going back 20 years, lose their pensions, lose their homes because of it. In the UK, we're seeing it now. One of the bishops in the Midlands, I forget which one, called the police on a member of his own clergy. Because the vicar was reading from Scripture without commentary at the General Synod of the Church of England, which is the kind of Parliament Council of the Church, and he was visited by the police and questioned about hate speech that he'd been making. The hate speech was the Book of Romans that he read out loud at the General Synod, and it was the bishop that called the goons. I mean, that's a great example of what persecution looks like, when the person that has authority gets in contact with someone else with authority and abuses the authority to accuse someone of doing something they haven't actually done, to try and frighten them into stopping.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say, blessed is that minister. I don't know his name, but blessed is that minister.
Huh. Yeah.
I think that is a perfect example of what this is about.
Well, under what circumstances would we ever call someone like that blessed? Only if they've been rescued by an outside force.
And are destined for somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Even before the rescue comes fully, you're still blessed because you're destined. If the rescue's still coming, you're still blessed.
Right.
Like,
well, because the bill is still coming and you're going to have enough for it.
Yeah.
Because Christ is going to pay it for you.
Huh.
And then you get a development of this idea in verse 11.
Blessed.
It feels like a development of the same idea.
Yeah. Blessed are you. Are you? That got real personal. When others
I never saw that. Those, you.
Yeah. And I wonder if he's like looking down at the disciples. Blessed are you.
That's really good. I'm going to highlight that.
When others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. He mentions himself now for the first time. It's the first me, first person. Oh. Rejoice. Now there's an instruction, and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
So actually the so what section is go and be happy.
Yeah.
That's the so what section.
Rejoice.
Yeah, when you get reviled, sort of just picked on and spat at and, slandered. When you're persecuted, there's that authoritative kind of idea of physical. It's a physical word. There's a sort of mental torment and opprobrium mixed with actual physical violence of all kinds. And I love that, all kinds of evil. It's like, there's a lot of different kinds.
This is really interesting. So what do you do? The question I'm wondering is, what do you do if you look through this and you're like, I am just not a merciful person. I can't seem to let this, I got this grudge against this person I know and love, and I can't let it go.
Well, it's time to go back.
Like there's
It's time to go back to the start. Right? If this is a little journey through a Christian life that begins with recognition of the poverty of your own spirit, and then grief and mourning at the poverty of your own spirit, and then meekly trusting God that he can do something about the poverty of your spirit, and then receiving righteousness as a starving person receives food, right? Mm-hmm. Then I think if you get to the bottom of this list and you're like, I'm really struggling with this thing, then it's time to go back to the start of the list again.
It's like the 12 steps a little bit.
It is a bit like that. No, it is a bit like that.
Go back to step 1. If you fall off, then go back to recognize you're poor in spirit.
The graphic that Bridget put together has a chutes and ladders, or as the Brits would say, snakes and ladders kind of feel to it in a way.
Isn't it called Snakes and Ladders here?
Chutes and ladders.
Oh, really?
In America.
I never played that game, but yeah.
You're a snake man, are you?
I'm total snake man.
Thought as much. So I'd say you got to go back. Do not collect $200. Go back. Go back to go.
Well, maybe you do collect $200 and go back to the start. Like more than $200. Just happy to be here. I feel like I often feel like I'm a just happy to be here Christian.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, all right, we're back to verse 3. Poor in spirit. All right.
Yeah. But because if you're having trouble forgiving someone, that is because you think you're better than they are. And that's the real root of it. So that isn't to say that it's easy to forgive people, particularly if they've done something really bad.
Yeah.
If they have abused your person, if they've taken your virginity, or your life, or your child's life, or
hurt someone you love,
your things. Yeah, I mean, if there's some really foul thing gone on, and that goes on in our life, it went on in theirs.
Yeah,
it may have happened more there. It can be immensely difficult to forgive, and that's why we have to go back to verse 3, because if you're having a hard time forgiving, this is indicative of the fact that you've not done the mourning thing. You haven't really grappled with the reality of your poverty of spirit, and certainly you haven't begun to mourn it yet if you're in the position of judging other people.
I think you just have to, this takes us into such a place of recognizing that we're just a little lower than the person next to us. Like we're far lower and at the same time more loved.
Yeah.
I think that's a hard thing to hold in tension. A lot of us have this, I think it's very common. It's like self-flagellation or self-hatred is pretty common. But I wonder if it's kind of like there's a form of pride that like, I expect that I should have the capacity to be better because inside I think I'm better than I'm turning out to be.
Oh, we hear this all the time. Every time some megastar does something dumb,
it's not me.
human, it wasn't me that did that. That's not the real me. That doesn't represent who I am. I don't know what came over me.
Yeah.
It's like there's a mantra. It's like, well, it is the real you. And I do know what came over you.
Yeah.
It's the same thing because it's the same thing I do.
Yeah.
And there comes this wonderful peacemaking thing. I mean, if you want to make peace with someone, why not admit your faults? It's a great way to start. I mean, my daughter does that. She's a middle school girl. I mean, it's a great strategy for surviving middle school. Actually,
being emotionally mature.
Yeah, you just if you're going to call people on their sin, make sure you're willing to admit your own.
I've always found those conversations. I hate those when you have to call someone out, but sometimes it does happen, and I think being in that mindset first of realizing how needy you are and how screwed up you are, that changes everything. Rejoice. I went to a wedding, I did a wedding this last weekend. It's really good fun. Justin and Mikkel, Pastor Justin, friend of our podcast, you've heard him several times, has married Mikkel. Fun wedding. He's white, she's black. Lots of interesting culture things going on in the room, which I really enjoyed. They made a lot of fun of that, which was quite nice to see. I mean, they're at ease with each other, very much so. They used all of their authority to make several really lovely sort of racial jokes that probably in the wider culture we can't make yet, but it was nice. And one of the things that was fun to see, apart from the fact that their wedding cake was literally chocolate and vanilla. Like they went on. They did this a lot. One of the things I absolutely loved was the dancing, because the white people couldn't dance. It was really bad. And then Mikkel's family, they were dancing, and it was really cool. And they were leaping with joy as they danced. It's this dance. Word. Well, they could dance, but it was the word rejoice. The word rejoice, or to be cheerful, is a word that's derived, the word gladness is a word that's derived from such exceeding joy that one jumps for joy. Wow. It's what it means to jump for joy. Agaliao. And it means agan is much. So much jumping for joy. Exceeding jumping. It's a dancing word. And just the image of watching Mikkel's dad delight in the day, in this physical, energetic dance, reminded me of this word. And I knew I was going to preach on this word. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. I see here an idea that if you recognize what God has done for you, you're going to jump about. I mean, David did it with the Ark of the Covenant. Do you remember? Yeah, I did. Yeah, he totally did.
And his wife, also called Michael,
Joy,
she had kind of disdain for him, didn't she? It's like, what are you doing leaping around in your pants?
Well, it takes away your dignity.
Yes.
And there's no room for any kind of self-created dignity among the Beatitudes.
No.
It's all dignity that God gives to you.
It is a fun thing. They're having fun. Yeah. Rejoice and be glad.
I think about this too. Like, I think Jesus' disciples, the Chosen actually captures this really well. That they had a lot of fun. Like, being a Christian is fun. It's hard. It's really hard and demanding, but like, I think there's being a freedom from one's self. There's a as Tim Keller said, a freedom of self-forgetfulness
Yeah.
that like enables joy.
Abandonment. There's an abandon here.
Yeah. There's a joy in all of this because you know that you're blessed.
But it's extraordinary because it comes in the context of being persecuted and reviled.
Yeah.
And in the face of this, there's this joy. I mean, I think, what is the one thing a bully cannot stand? It is to see their victim enjoying themselves.
I think the devil hates when
to be
have
mocked,
fun.
to have fun.
Oh yeah.
A dance, to do a jig.
Yeah.
And you go, what? Poor in spirit, mourning, meek, doing all these boring things like being merciful and pure and making peace, and then getting persecuted and reviled and slandered by the authorities and by everybody in the village.
Yeah.
And your response is to jump around.
It's like
a wedding.
Sticking their tongue out at the
it's
devil.
the raspberry.
Yeah.
I love it. So there is a structure to the Beatitudes. I think it takes us on a journey. It's one person. It's not a set of disparate ideas, but it's one person going on a spiritual journey. And like Chutes and Ladders, you might find as you work your way down the Beatitudes, you need to go back to the start.
Yeah.
As you say, Ben, you can't collect $200 because Jesus is nice.
He's more than nice.
But he is more than nice. And as we go on through the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, which we're going to do this summer and next, we're going to take 2 summers to do it.
Yeah.
We'll have to keep coming back to the Beatitudes because we're going to forget them.
Oh, you know what? This is a really great thing because a lot of this is very convicting. Like it is a amplification of, it is more hardcore than anything in the Jewish law. Like you will never find a more rigorous ethical standard than what you find in the Sermon on the Mount. And it's gonna hit everybody, and everyone's gonna feel like, oh, I've failed. And maybe the best thing to say is like to just smile and laugh and be like, that's great. Go back to step 1. Go back to verse 3.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to this because next year when we do the second half of the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to start with the Beatitudes again as a reminder. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation again, to seeing where we are, where are me and you.
I have the feeling that as I investigate my personal life as we go through this, that I'm probably not going to get an A.
I think I'm somewhere around verse 3.
Yeah, I'm between verse 3 and 4.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, this is cool. You got this. I'm even more. I was super psyched about this series before we started doing this podcast, but really diving into this makes me even more excited. I think it's going to be really fun, really cool.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. And really good to take a break from a 5-month sermon to do 3 months on a sermon.
Yeah. A sermon on a sermon on a sermon.
Is that meta?
That is meta.
Yes! Yes!
You correctly identified meta.
For the first time. Oh, man.
It has a millennial's seal of approval.
Wow. I should get this. Do I get a thing? What's this? Oh, yeah, get a substantial point. What else do I get?
Wait, it's coming.
Oh. I'm getting all and press them all. I have been awarded 1 Mario coin. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for joining us. I've never ever had a Mario coin. It means a lot to me. I have been poor in spirit for so long. Yeah. And now I have the infinite riches of a Mario coin.
Then you need to go back to verse 3.
Oh no.
Be poor in spirit again.
All right. This has been a podcast of Christchurch Fox Chapel, a podcast that has too many sound samples recorded on its mixing desk. Thank you for joining us. We love you. We'll see you all very soon. And of course, thank you so much for stopping by.
Stay classy.